first speaker is Guru Vemulakonda. Buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse, Guru Vemulakonda.
The pen felt solid and rolled smoothly on the contract as I signed my name on the dotted line. I handed the contract over the polished mahogany desk, and I knew there was no turning back. After living for 6 years in an apartment, I decided to live the American dream. In my case, it was a 10-year colonial home in Canton, Michigan. The euphoria didn't last long. I barely made it out to the parking lot, and I started thinking, maybe I should have asked the realtor for a more valuable home, cheaper. Fellow Toastmasters, guests, and anyone who's waited sheepishly in the Walmart return line after the Black Friday sale, I had the case of buyer's remorse. Have you had that case, similar situation where you bought something and immediately thought, what was I thinking? You're not alone. A full 7% of sales from the Black Friday sale I was talking about are returned. The number is even higher for online sales. It's 30%. These are the best bargains in the year, people. I've often wondered if there's a decision-making process that goes on. Is there a framework that we can use to prevent the buyer's remorse? Just the other day, my 5-year-old came up to me and said, "Dad, I've made a decision. I've decided to become an astronaut." Full disclosure, I did give him a book on space in the library just a few hours ago. Take another decision. All of you are making this decision, aren't you? Sitting in the room, deciding whether to breathe or not. Really? Are you deciding whether to breathe or not? Of course not. If you wanted to survive, you have to breathe air. And by the way, air is free, so there is no decision to make. So let's think about it. There are two things that come into play. One is constraints. It could be money, it could be time, it could be knowledge. And the second thing is needs. Needs can be physical needs, to breathe, to survive, to live, food, shelter. Or it could be social needs, just keeping up with the Joneses. So think about a matrix with the vertical axis as constraints and the horizontal axis as needs, going from low to high, low to high. So we already talked about the high needs and low constraints, which is breathing. Easy, no decision there, no constraints, you just make that decision, it's unconscious. Let's move a little bit higher up in that matrix. This is the decision where there are few constraints there, like buying a house. I had a furnace broken down on me a couple of years ago. It was in the winter. Not too different from the winter we are having today. There was a decision to be made. I was not about to let my family freeze. I Googled a contractor. He came the very next day, fixed the furnace, and everything was back to normal. It cost me an arm and a leg. I railed against my feet. Why did it happen? Why now? But there was no buyer's remorse. Let me tell you that. There was no buyer's remorse. Because it had to be done. Now, if it had happened in summer, it could be different. Because then I would have probably headed out to the Home Depot, and ask my friend Ralph, hey, how do I go about fixing this? Is there something I can use to purchase and go and fix it on my own? Maybe not as expensive as a contractor would charge me. So you could optimize these resources. So one of the ways to reduce your buyer's remorse is to optimize your resources of time, knowledge, and money. In this case, I was in getting more know-how and then reducing the amount of money I spent. That way, I would reduce my buyer's remorse. One option. Now let's move along the matrix to the left side, in which case you have a low need and a high constraint. Now this is a case of buying the next iPad with the latest Retina display. You already have an iPod and an iPad sitting at home, but you want the new one. Why? Because your neighbor has it, or your colleague has it. Or maybe you want to take that next vacation to Hawaii, because on your Facebook, your best friend from California just posted some pretty pictures of Hawaii. So in this case, what do? What's the best way of overcoming buyer's remorse? What you can do is to plan a budget. Decide beforehand, I will make this trip to Hawaii or to Disney 6 months down the line. I'll save some money, I'll do my research, find the best deal that's available, and then make that trip. Reduced buyer's remorse. Because you know all the factors, you've made that plan, and you've stuck to that plan. And finally, at the bottom of the matrix, low needs and low constraints. This is when you reach out for that Dorito pack. On your way out, you finished shopping. Everything is done. Your checklist is finished. And then just as you leave, you find this Dorito packet calling you. You can feel that salty chips going down your mouth. And you must have it. So really, in this case, it builds up. Over time, you find out as you start looking at the scale and finding out you're putting on those extra pounds, you start realizing it only after some time. In this case, you have to look at moderation and self-control to overcome that buyer's remorse. So fellow Toastmasters, if you find yourself making snap decisions, ask yourself just 2 questions. Can you afford it? And do you need it? Really? Mr. Toastmaster.